because they have very high potential payoff, even though they're risky. So if I look at the world in which I normally operate, which is the world of venture capital, there are a couple of things you should know because I think it informs how people think about funding ventures and what the actual demographics are of venture capital. So over the past 15 years, it turns out that the failure rate of professional venture capitalists is almost 60%. And what I mean by that is they put money in lots of different... very early in the science, then there's no clear path to a commercial outcome. And therefore, people who are interested in investing in those kinds of projects simply are not going to get money so early in the process. And that's why at the Stem Cell Institute, the idea was to raise philanthropic dollars and to allocate them accordingly. And at the Stem Cell Institute, importantly, not raise money in the way many hospitals do, which is what I call the grateful patient model, or my child has a specific disease, therefore I want you to cure this disease, but rather to support a new way of doing science. So something that we're going to break down those boundaries, that would focus on the fundamental process of cell differentiation and what that might mean for drug discovery, what that might mean for regenerative medicine. So that's the basic idea. So venture capital, you don't get the good ones without the 60% failure. That's the fundamental. So the next thing you ought to keep in mind is that all ventures should be viewed as structured experiments. So let's say that instead of talking about life science, I go out here and I find a consumer-facing website. So what they want to do is they want to create a prototype of their website. They want to stick it up there. They want to see whether or not customers come and whether or not they can monetize. And conditional on that outcome, they go raise more money to scale up and hire more people and maybe build a more robust architecture behind it. And if that works, then they want to scale up one more time. So the thing I've come to believe is the following, that the old saying that time is money, and I've turned it on its head, which is money is time. And so in structured experiments, you raise money to buy time to prove something. And if the proof is positive, then you get the right to raise more money to buy more time to prove something different. Now, in the situation with a web-facing consumer startup, it turns out it costs $5,000 to run the first experiment. Or it takes pizza. So if you get a Harvard undergraduate to mock up a website, it's really not very expensive, and it typically doesn't take very long. You're in a completely different realm, in which both the amount of money required to get to the next proof point, the next inflection point, is high, the time is long, and the ultimate commercial payoff may be 15 years down the road. And so typically that's just a very hard sequence of investments to make because the likelihood of an interim failure is relatively high, and the cost of buying each unit of information is high, and a lot of it is outside of your control. That is, for example, what the FDA does, what the healthcare reimbursement system does. A lot of the payoff structure is really outside of your control. So the question is, where do you get the money to run these experiments? Now, it used to be, in the old days, if you go back to the history of Genentech and Hypertech and the like, that the amount of money required to start Genentech, just as an example, was measured in the millions of dollars. It was measured actually as under $10 million. So the point to produce a product was under $10 million. It was a relatively short period of time. And they raised money from venture capitalists. Venture capitalists are beginning to abandon the process of investing in life sciences because the time frames have gone out by at least another 5 years, and the amount of capital to prove those later points has doubled. And the uncertainty about the outcome has gone up. And so when you reverse engineer, well, where would I logically start to allocate my money in order to find the next great therapy or help rebuild heart muscle or accelerate the production of blood stem cells? The fact is it's become harder and harder, and people are less willing to back the initial stages of that process. So you have to get money somewhere. The NIH, as I said, does perform an incredibly valuable function. It provides money to support those kinds of projects, but not all of the projects that you would like supported. So the first comment is philanthropy has turned out to be unbelievably important. And what all of us are going to need to do is to get more people to give more money without the expectation of financial return, but because they believe those investments will have a very high payoff because it's a leveraged investment in a new way of doing science. That then will advance the science further than would have been possible in the absence of those philanthropic dollars. It will also be leveraged by access to traditional sources like the NIH. And that typically was the point at which venture capitalists might come in. I'm sorry to tell you, that's not going to happen. There's several reasons. One is the median rate of return on venture capital in the past 12 years is 0. Now, there are days on which, like today, I believe 0 is a high return and attractive. It's not a good day in the stock market. 0, as you know, is the only number that actually compounds at the same rate as the interim return. People are not going to tie up their money in an illiquid investment for 10 to 13 years if they think the median rate of return is 0. It also turns out that it's an industry in which returns are highly skewed. So 50% of the distributions in the venture capital business in the past 15 years came from under 30 firms. So there's 750 firms in the industry. 50% came from a small handful of firms who had a very small, relatively small share of the resources in the industry. So if you happen to be in the rest of the distribution, then you had really poor returns. So they're going to wait and try to have lower risk and higher return, and they're going to abandon one part of the market. It's just going to get like the tide going out. And so the question is, how do you fill that vacuum? Again, I think you're going to have to go to alternative sources. So in the description of what I was supposed to talk about, there was a statement about these new kinds of organizations that are often philanthropic organizations, but are prepared to finance taking an idea to the next stage. Recently, the Cure Alzheimer's Fund announced a $5.4 million grant to focus on genetics